Do the Denver Nuggets have a backup point guard crisis? I don't know if there's such a thing as a backup point guard crisis, but if there is, Denver might have one. We'll talk about that, takeaways from Summer League, and why the Nuggets did not land Gary Trent Jr. All that and more on Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being an everydayer and joining us Monday through Friday. Glad to have you guys with us here on a Wednesday for World's Finest. Adam Mares, tan and back from Vegas, where his pockets are overflowing with quarters after his with his success at the tables at Circa. On today's show, we'll talk about Summer League. We'll get into this question of whether or not the Nuggets really do have a backup point guard crisis. We'll talk about the decision by Gary Trent Jr. to join the Bucks on a minimum deal and why I don't think he was a good fit for the Nuggets at all. We'll talk about whether or not Denver can successfully bluff the LA Clippers in order to avoid having to give up any assets for Russell Westbrook. And we'll hit on a little bit more as we head into the show. We're going to try and keep this show short because at the end of the show, as we record this live at 9:30 Mountain Time, at 10 o'clock, Team Serbia takes on Team USA in a friendly. And, of course, we both want to catch that. Adam, glad to see you, buddy. Glad you're back from Vegas.
Glad to be back.
I did not have FOMO this year, especially after watching Alexander Sarr go 0 of 15 last night. I mentioned this the other day, actually, to a mutual friend of ours, actually, that I've watched more Summer League at home because I'm not in Vegas doing the schmoozing and doing everything else. So I've actually consumed a lot of Summer League.
That's how it goes.
Nuggets played another Summer League game last night. They lose again. Jalen Pickett struggles again. We'll talk about kind of all this and more. I think it's positive. The biggest positive for me to come out of Summer League is not only that Julian Strawther played well, but that he played well enough for them to shut him down. That's a mark of confidence. My biggest negative takeaway is that the Jalen Pickett experiment process has gone very, very badly. I'm still not willing to go ahead and sell all the stock. I'm not completely out. I think Summer League is a very weird environment and careers are very different, but it's looking pretty bad. Those are my two big takeaways from Summer League. What about yours?
And Trey Alexander, I think, has to be in there in the mix just because he is a guy that, well, I don't know that he's going to make an immediate impact on like this upcoming season. He is a guy that I think could find his way into the program, you know, a la a Colin Gillespie to some extent, but even a Torrey Craig, a Monte Morris, other two-way guys that have become regular roster guys for a time being. But to your first point is the most important one, which is Julian Strawther. You wanted him to look slowed down, more mature, more confident, more in control, and then maybe to show parts of his game that you hadn't seen. And I think he checked every single one of those boxes. The degree to which he checked those boxes is probably up for debate or, personal opinion. But when you talk about shoot the ball well, okay, shot 41% on pretty good volume from three while being the main guy. That's encouraging. It would have been different if he would have shot 30% or, he'd say, okay, but I don't know if he can shoot well. He shot very well. He got to the foul line, which is a part of his game we hadn't really seen before. And then the tempo that he played with, while he got his shot blocked a decent amount, turned the ball over a decent amount, he still was able to play. You can tell when guys understand the pace and speed of NBA basketball. And at Summer League, most guys don't. He did. He was in control. He knew how to go, how to do different things, and he just played with confidence. So I think for me, one of the bigger Strawther skeptics, in terms of can he really impact this season in a positive way, this was very encouraging Summer League for me.
Well, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Yeah, I've talked kind of about the idea of potentially Julian Strawther being at least in the rotation for starting shooting guard. Based off of Michael Malone's comments talked about on the last show and about how, I don't hate the idea of there being hey, maybe this is a Julian Strawther night, not a Christian Brown night. I actually don't think that's the worst concept possible. I don't think it'll happen, but I think it's at least up for a little bit of debate.
And I'll tell you, I think that there are people in the organization that would like that as well, that would like sort of a fluid, why do we have to be fixed on this exact guy starting and closing every single game? And I think when you had our previous starting five with KCP, you were always going to open and close with those guys. I do think there's a world now where it's what does the game need?
I don't want to put out the Pickett conversation too long, but I do want to ask you about Trey Alexander because he's not he fits in the category of guys whose game doesn't necessarily speak to you the way some other guys do. And listening to DMVR and listening to your comments and seeing your tweets, like it's become apparent like he's really kind of turned you around on him. What do you think about his? I guess here's.
I didn't know anything about him, to be honest with you, going in.
Fair enough. So I guess here's my big question for you is like, there's the overall skill level, and the Nuggets do need that. They just need talented guys right now, especially in terms of depth. But how do you feel like his fit is with this team, either in various minutes with Nikola or without?
Summer League almost tells you more like it tells you as much what a guy's skill set is as it does how that will translate to the NBA, because this is still not NBA basketball. It's probably closer to the G League than it is anything. And if a guy blows up the G League, we don't say, okay, he's clearly going to be great in the NBA. But the mold of player is very intriguing. He's got a great off the dribble game, off the dribble shot, pull up shot, pick and roll game. He just is a scorer, a natural scorer, and he has good size. I mean, he's legitimately tall and long. He's skinny. He's kind of, he's thin framed, but he's got a good build on him. And he just reminds me in a lot of ways of Jamal Murray. There's a lot of similarities in his game to how he scores. He's not a great point guard, in my opinion. He doesn't see the court particularly well, but he can pass. So he's a guy to me that definitely is a combo guard. And while I think there's probably going to be a lot of seasoning before he's ready for the NBA level, like in extended minutes. He is a guy that I think you look at and say there's a foundation there to grow into an NBA player. And that's what you're looking for when you get a two-way. So that's it. He has a skill set to me that I think is an NBA skill set, and one that Denver is already somewhat familiar with in Jamal Murray.
I've talked a lot about Pickett on the show. You've talked a lot about Pickett on DNVR, and another bad game last night, and I keep kind of waiting for it to kind of turn around. And I mentioned this the other day that, like, look, I just don't think Summer League is a good environment for him, because there needs to be structure in the offense, and it's a league where your ability to shake an individual defender one-on-one is what opens up opportunities for you to play make. It's all very simple, up-down stuff, and that's not Pickett's game at all. And so. But you kind of mentioned this on Twitter that, look, whatever you think of Pickett, he was better in college and he was better in the G League last year, and then in Summer League last year, and now there's this. So I kind of want to ask you this question. I think it's hard to kind of look at the Nuggets developmental program and say that it hasn't been successful, even if you want to exclude Nikola and say, like, that's Nikola Jokic. I think that's fair. But if you look at Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, a number of other players that have come, even MPJ, guys that really have improved under the Nuggets, Strawther to a certain degree, to whatever degree this translates to the regular season. But do you at any point kind of look at the situation and go, the Nuggets never really understood what Pickett was and didn't set him up in a way to develop his talents in a way that would have made the Summer League more successful or made his career so far more successful?
Well, I'll start by saying that I think Pickett's sort of failures are his own. It always falls on the NBA player at some point. I always remember something Tim Connolly told me, that a lot of guys, if the situation isn't perfect, they fall apart. They blame other people. They do this or that. Like, you get to the NBA, it's very rare that you fall into the perfect situation immediately. You have to make your own luck, and he clearly hasn't done that. I think Pickett, watching him up close, to me, it's very clear that he's broken. That he has done. Like, I thought halfway through game 2, he got out of the way in that game for the rest of the game. And I don't think it was by the design of the coaches from, the conversations afterwards. I think it was a little bit of he was so, it almost reminds you of Zeke Najee's second Summer League, where he was so flustered and shook by how things were going that it was almost like, I'm going to get out the way and try to just rebound and do some other things. And he made some plays there, but to me, he is completely broken, and I don't expect any of this to change. In fact, you almost, like Zeke Najee a few years back, you almost go what's the point of playing him in this environment? He's clearly going to go back to the G League this year. That's do you need to see these next 2 games? You'll probably still roll him out there. Probably still will play. Some of this is just testing his own mettle. But for me, it's kind of over in terms of what will happen. But the question about the training staff, I don't think it's that. I don't think it's a Nuggets have successes and failures over the years with the same player development staff. Do I think they have the best one in the biz? Absolutely not. Do they have the best training facility? Absolutely not. So this is not trying to quantify how good or bad they are, but I don't think that is the reason for Pickett's failure. I will say, if you followed my Pickett timeline, I love passers. Like he's like Lonzo Ball, like these types of players. It's a mold of player that I like almost more than the like impact level of that player. Initially, you just say, okay, I like that mold. Let's see what they become. I don't believe that the Nuggets coaching staff ever wanted Pickett, and I don't think that I think a lot of this has to do with you're going to have to go the hard way in this because we're not going. This is not a tool that we are necessarily wanting in our war chest. And again, it's not an excuse for Pickett. But I softened on the Pickett stuff before his first season because in having conversations with people in the org, it was like, okay, he's going to have to go the long route, G League, and work his way up, and we'll reevaluate in the coming years. You see him this year, clearly has regressed. Like, that's why I put this out there. Whatever you think of him, he is playing significantly worse right now than he was last year. And that just tells you where a guy's confidence is, where he is at in his relationship to the role and the things being asked to him. So he's not this bad, but I think he is this bad now for Denver.
On the other side, all right, well, if Jalen Pickett's out, then what does that mean for the Nuggets backup point guard spot? We'll talk about that. And if the Nuggets can successfully negotiate this kind of tricky situation with Russell Westbrook. Plus, we'll talk about why Gary Trent Jr. elected not to join the Denver Nuggets, or if there was even interest from that side. We'll talk about that and more up next here on Locked On Nuggets. I want to let you know about Game Time. It's the summer, which means baseball, which means you can catch great games at Rockies games. Look, I think that stadium is one of the coolest places in the country. I'm
going this weekend.
It's such an amazing place to catch a game. Like, it's just whether you're going with the kids and they get to run around and do all the fun stuff there, you're going with family, or you're going with a group of friends if you're fortunate to be young and without kids. You get to go to the rooftop bar, all sorts of cool stuff, and you can get great tickets on Game Time. Even wait till after that first inning, and you're going to get such great deals. You can just walk up and get great ticket deals for you to go see a game. Absolutely phenomenal. I use Game Time to get tickets for the minor league baseball game I'm going to next week in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm going to see the Durham Bulls. Used it for that. I've got tickets for Dave Matthews Band. Yes, I am that person. I have got tickets for that from Game Time. You get all sorts of great tickets through the Game Time app. You can save up to 60% off buy in last minutes for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. They've got a lowest price guarantee that says Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. The seat views are great. You get a panoramic view. So you're not just going to see what's in front of you. You don't just see like the overhead look. You actually get to see what your view will be of the event. Make sure to check out Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. This will be a shorter show again because we are trying to make it to the 10 o'clock Serbia team versus Team USA. Friendly. All right. So let's talk about this.
Can we real quick before we move on, a couple of things about the last thing on the Pickett thing, because I think he's done. So now you ask, okay, he has 2 years left on his deal, which, by the way, everybody's signing their a lot of people are signing their second round draft picks to these deals. I think it's really a paradigm shift where people are looking at, you need contracts now to trade, and we'll see if they'll be able to trade him. One thing people have asked me where I expect him to go. Denver will either hold on to him for another year and then try to bite him out or trade at that point. But there also is, you look at the teams who are second apron teams that are tax teams that want to get off of tax. And if you can trade a 1.5 per year $1 million contract for a $2 million contract, that's a $500,000 savings on a tax team that could mean $2 million savings for them when you talk about all the tax bills that they have, like where every dollar becomes $2 or $3. So I think that there is still, like when people say there's no way you trade them, tax teams also have their Pickets on their roster. And if they could trade their Pickett for our Pickett and it saves you $3 million, it's like, that's, I think, the best scenario you look at now. So if you want to look at the tax teams, you look at a Phoenix, you look at some of those guys, look at the end of the roster and say, is there a guy there that is making slightly more that they would get off of?
It's really, I've been through 2 different CBAs before this one. And the 2 that I've covered, I have never seen a series of changes that have resulted in such confusion and trepidation and kind of missteps by not just a front office, but by collectively front offices as they try and, like, it was very clear, I think yesterday, Howard Beck had a comment from Adam Silver after his press conference talking about the second apron, about how like, yeah, we maybe have to look at least, first explaining some of this, and then two, changing the language, and then maybe like, we'll see how this kind of goes. It's an evolving process. I kind of feel the same. We're going to get the same pushback on the fact that they changed it to these guaranteed deals being available for second round picks, where I just feel like you're going to have a lot of teams that are like, yeah, I don't know if we wanted this. Like, I don't know. Like there was it was available and they used it. And like, again, you mentioned a lot of teams are doing this, but I think it does kind of show you like, no, there's a reason why in the beginning, second round picks were non-guaranteed. You need that kind of flexibility to be like, yeah, it just didn't work out for us. Like, that's why he was drafted in the 40s. Like, that's fine. Or, high in the 30s. Like, it should be fine for you to go ahead and move on and allow that player also to go somewhere else and have a better opportunity. Cause like that to me is part of this equation too, where look, Jalen Pickett I see this all the time where a guy thrives somewhere else. And it's not really that like they mismanaged him. It's like, no, he just got a different opportunity with a coach that had a different relationship with him and it worked out better. Yeah. And those opportunities for those guys, I think, is actually more important, because now it becomes like actually more of a condemnation of, well, they gave him all this money and he didn't work out. And that actually, I think, works against them.
Well, also, I think there's another angle to this. I really lamented the Colin Gillespie playing against the Portland Trailblazers the two times when Portland was resting their starters. Because those games, the Nuggets won by 30 points in those games. If there is ever a gimme game for you to say, let's find out what we have here, those would be them. So it wasn't just a play this young guy in that moment because you think he's good. It could be if you had 400 minutes of Pickett last year, 500 minutes, you might be further ahead in understanding who and what he is. And like, hey, all right, we got to move on from this. This isn't where we're going. Let's get out of this early. Now I think you see, you get this far down the road and it's like, okay, now some tough decisions have to be made. It might have even informed your draft process if you would have had a little bit more of a look at him.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. So there's been a lot of questions about let's talk about, I want to hit real quickly on Gary Trent Jr. I just want to hit this real quick.
Sure.
So there was, Gary Trent Jr. signs with the Milwaukee Bucks for the minimum. And the report is that he turned down multiple offers for more years and more money in order for him to play with Dame, try and win a championship, probably recoup his value a little bit. A little bit of context on this. So he's a clutch guy. And there was kind of a sense of like, for years, I heard that he wanted like a big money deal, that he was like after big money. And there's actually kind of a similarity here where these players if you are of Gary Trent Jr. or Tyus Jones's class, this CBA has been a disaster for you because teams are willing to give the lower guys a little bit more money and they're willing to give the higher guys $350 million in Jason Tatum's case. Again, Jason Tatum's worth it under the terms of the CBA. I'm just keep looking at that and being like, Jason Tatum signed a 5-year deal worth $350 million. But these are the guys that are getting squeezed. Like Tyus Jones, I heard was looking for 15 to 17 million per year. He was looking for starter money from a lot of teams a year ago that were looking to trade for him. Like he thought he was going to be like a starting point guard because he'd been one of the best backups. He's still out there, and there's a lot of conversation of like, well, Denver can't get him. It's a minimum contract. And I'm like, guys, look around. The money's not there. Like there's no money left. Everybody's pretty much like got their roster set. There's a few spots. And certainly if a team like Detroit pivots and decides that they want him, but why is Detroit going to want Tyus Jones when they've got Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham? That doesn't make any sense. And so, maybe there's an opportunity down the line for some team to like, and maybe he chooses somebody else, but I don't think it's off the table. What I do think though, is I don't think Gary Trent Jr. is like a Denver type player. I just have never really thought this watching his game. I don't think he would fit well with the team. I don't think the mindset would be great. I think that he would frustrate fans much in the way that some other former two guards have frustrated the team. Not Gary Harris as well.
Will Barton.
Yeah. I'm talking about Will. And that kind of approach. Now, I think it's actually really good that he was willing to take less money and be like, I want to be on a winning team. We'll see if he can contribute to Milwaukee. But I don't think that Denver missing out on GTJ, even though they are at need of talent. I agree. But it does have to be, if you're trying to compete for a championship, you still should hold out for the right talent. And I don't think GTJ was it.
Yeah, I don't think he was the right talent either, although he is a good enough player that he could surprise you. He was a guy that I liked early on in his career and then have not liked as much as it's gone on. Clearly, that's the word on the street as well, as he is remaining here or was remaining here all the way up until July 15th. So to me, this one, fans, it's kind of funny. I do think there's something to, there are names. This is the Robert Covington effect. And really, it was originally the Trevor Ariza effect. Trevor Ariza helps the Lakers win a championship in 2009. And by 2019, people were still clamoring for him to be on the roster because it's like, we know him, we saw him, we got his name, like that's a guy. Yeah. And sometimes it's not the case. I think Seth Curry is another one of these guys that a lot of people last summer were, Seth Curry's out there. He's out there. You got to go get Seth Curry. And it's like, you know the name, but are you sure he's good? And of course, he didn't play last year very much because he's not that great. Gary Trent Jr., I think, is better than that, but clearly comes with some other baggage. And I agree with you. I like Christian Brown. Julian Strawther, to me, is Gary Trent Jr. going to be better than Julian Strawther? Maybe. He might be. But I think that it's worth the gamble of saying we have Strawther and we believe in him. He's in our pipeline, and we'll ride with him rather than Gary Trent Jr.
All right. So people have been asking about a Russell Westbrook update. We'll talk about what we know, what we've heard. And this is the key question for me. Can Denver successfully bluff the LA Clippers? We'll talk about that and more as we wrap up here.
I think it's actually different question than that. We'll get to that on the other side.
Let's do it on Locked On Nuggets.
Oh, 2 in a row.
Back here on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us, making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us. Final segment here on World's Finest on a Wednesday. Glad to have Adam Mares back with us. Glad for all you guys hanging out with the chat on youtube.com/LockedOnNuggets. Give us a 5-star review if you're listening on the podcast, and tell a friend. We are trying to get the podcast views up. So let's podcast listens and downloads up. Help us out. All right.
Let me real quick address this. I watched Calvin Booth interview about the offseason. That dude seems kind of lost, man. I don't see him believing in his own offseason moves. You don't know Calvin Booth. He believes in his moves. Also, I will say this, because being around Summer League, this is when you get to spend some time with people, both Michael Malone and, coaching staff and front office, various people in those two departments. I think that the organization feels different than the fan base. It's to some degree. Disagreement. I mean, there's just like in real life, everybody has all opinions, but I don't think that the Nuggets are panicking the way the fan base is panicking. I think the Nuggets still feel like all of these things. They're like, yeah, man, we're arguing over the 14th and 15th best guys on our roster. Like the roster is the top guys, the top 8 guys, and all this other stuff matters, but it's contained to, the gravity of which it deserves.
I've never talked to a front office official, and I'm not the most connected person, but I've talked to a fair amount, and I've never talked to a front office person and had them be like, yeah, we're panicking. They've never said that.
Yeah, but you can also tell when somebody is like trying to sell you, trying to sell you on a thing, or
totally agree.
And honestly, here's the other thing. These guys have no one to talk to. When I say these guys, I mean everyone in the NBA, whether it's agents, whether it's people around the players, front office, or coaching staff, they have no one to talk to that is on their level other than a handful of people. And so when things are bad, they're desperate to talk. Like there are times when you're like, you walk out of a practice or something, and you're like, man, he really wanted to talk today, didn't he? Like he really wanted to get my ear to try to say something. That wasn't necessarily how I felt this time. People had opinions, things to talk about, but there wasn't this level of like, what's going on? Oh no.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, when I say that, it's less a matter of like, well, no one says they're panicking when they are. It's more a matter of, I genuinely don't believe that front offices often panic because they're like, I got a pretty good job. I feel confident I can do it. I got here because of a good reason. But I also think that you're right. Because I also think that you're right that I think that there's a huge amount of confidence from the front office and how this is going to work out, which leads us to the question of, so what about the Russell Westbrook situation? So I said the key question is can Denver bluff the LA Clippers, who there's a lot of conversation after that Clippers Summer League game of, hey, the Clippers have to look at the situation and go like, that's your backup point guard? No, you're going to have to give us some stuff for Russ. And so the question is like, can Denver bluff LA? And you said that you think that there's a different question to ask. What is it?
I think it is less about can the Nuggets bluff or this bluff or that bluff, because I just don't think the Nuggets, first of all, what do they have to trade? You're not giving up the big pieces to trade. Does the Clippers want Jalen Pickett? Like at this point, I think the Nuggets would be like, hey, man, we'll do it. With maybe even throwing in Hunter Tyson. I don't know. But to me, it's less about that. It is more about can the Clippers and any other team interested in Russell Westbrook, should one present himself, could they bluff Jeff Schwartz, one of the most powerful agents in the NBA, and Russell Westbrook's agent? That's the real question here. Is you have to assume, given how open and everything is right now. I mean, you do this with Clutch, right? All the time we talk about Clutch. If a player is rumored to be going to a spot, it's okay. The agent says, we're going there. Not going to play for you this year, the Clippers. And if you trade him to the Orlando Magic or the Dallas Mavericks or any other team, he's not going to play there either. So, or his, let it be known. And you want to call my bluff? I'm the most powerful agent out there, or one of the most powerful agents out there. You want to call my bluff? There'll be repercussions. So I think there's a standoff that's not just a Nuggets Clippers standoff, but also in any other team interested. How much do you want to piss off this powerful agent to get Russell Westbrook pissed off? And also Russell Westbrook, who you're not even sure is going to be like a positive for you to begin with. So that's the dynamic, is that it really is this Mexican standoff with several different layers to it, all pointed in different directions.
I totally agree. I think there's got to be a, because like Blackburn was talking about this, about like, well, what if they trade him to somebody who wants to keep him? And I'm like, do you really want to keep Russell Westbrook if he doesn't want to be there? Does that sound like a fun situation for you?
On top of having a super powerful agent that's like, hey, okay, I'll remember this. We told you not to do it and you did it. So I'll remember that.
Yeah. So I think they're going to sort this out. Like I have said this. I do wonder if.
By the way, that doesn't mean it won't happen. It's still possible that teams do that. Not Damian Lillard didn't want to go to Milwaukee. He's a much bigger name than Russell Westbrook. So there are curveballs out there for sure.
I think it's interesting from this perspective of the Clippers with Russ, of they want to like find a deal that makes sense. I also kind of think that they don't want to give him to Denver. I think that they're hoping that a team will come along where Russ is like, yeah, I'd play for them. And they could like, you hold out, because the Clippers don't have to be in a rush here. Like that's one of the things about their offseason, is like, they don't have to be in a rush. They're not trying to get all the other parts of their pieces signed. They let Paul George go and are basically like, yeah, we're basically running it back, add a few guys, add some pretty good pieces. Right. But in general, like we're okay. Like we don't need to move Russ in order to facilitate this other thing we're trying to do. Right. So they can be patient while Denver sits there being like, so who's your backup point guard? Jalen Pickett. And that only like helps them in terms of trying to get that. Because even if it's like, yeah, but the Nuggets are not going to give you anything. Sure. But why not go ahead and wait to see? Maybe the front office does break it. Maybe you're able to get something done. I don't think it's going to work, but it's worth asking. But if you ask me like what's going to happen, the answer is like he's going to get traded to Charlotte or Detroit or Utah again, right, or one of these teams, even Oklahoma City, and they're going to buy him out, and he's going to sign with the Nuggets on a Vetman deal.
Well, what really is the Clippers want to get rid of him so they don't have to buy him out. Yeah. So you have to attach something that they don't value, a second round pick or something like that. And then you send it out. And some other team is like, yeah, we're in the business right now of collecting second round picks. So give us that. We'll buy him out and release him. And then again, with Jeff Schwartz and with Russell Westbrook, if he gets bought out, I think he has something like $4 million on his contract. He gets that $4 million, signs with the Denver Nuggets. That's a second contract. That's a win-win for Russell Westbrook. I get bought out and I get to be paid double. I get paid twice here. That's a great win for him. So that's why I say there's so many different little layers. None of them are that heavy or complicated, but there's a bunch of little pieces here that are like all those ducks have to kind of fall in a row.
What are you looking forward to in watching Team USA versus Serbia here in a few minutes? People will listen to this on the podcast after the game's over.
I mean, it's the friendly, so not that much, because like they're going to play each other 3 times, and each time gets potentially 3 times. Each time gets more serious. The friendly round, which you have to imagine is just like we need to get our cardio and size the timing up and everything else. Then you're going to have the group play, which you definitely want to win, but you don't want to show too much. It's like a regular season game, but you want to get out of your group play. So that game will be kind of interesting because, again, I don't expect either team to deploy their major strategy. And then if they meet in the medal round, I think it would be a completely different game where the teams are like, okay, we got our read on what we want to do to you. Now we're going to do a completely different strategy. We're going to throw a zone out there. Or we're going to play this guy or that guy or this combination. And so that's why I say this one is almost nothing other than just, is Serbia going to be able to physically match up with USA's athleticism and size? I know the size they will. They're a big team.
I'm really curious about Joel Embiid in this game because he's not had a great Team USA run so far, and that he's always goes so hard at Yoke. I'll be interested to see how this one goes.
Well, the funniest thing is, what about Yoke? I feel like Yoke rope-a-dope sometimes. This is why I wouldn't be surprised if Yoke fouls out.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh man, your guys' strategy of going to Embiid over and over every single time is really smart.
Marcel says, didn't he play yesterday? Maybe they sit him.
Could be. Yeah. He did play yesterday against Australia.
Yeah, wouldn't be shocked there at all. By the way, if you're wondering about bad summer league performances, at least it's not Alexander Sarr, who went 0 of 15 for the Wizards yesterday.
That's wild to go 0 for as a 7-footer.
Yeah, it's summer league, but like, oh man, that's it takes a lot for me to overreact to a summer league game. That's the kind of performance that'll make me overreact to a summer league game. If I was a Wizards fan, like I would be throwing things if I was on Locked On Wizards right now.
Can I just, are you wrapping up?
Yeah.
I just had a couple other notes on summer league that I think are interesting. It's always interesting who's around. And as I mentioned, Aaron Gordon was there, which was great to see. Christian Brown, Peyton Watson, I believe is that the extent of the players that were there. It was funny. I was thinking about what veterans were there. There's not that many other people. I mean, the other guys are abroad right now with their respective teams. So the Nuggets, they kind of show up. But more importantly, as I mentioned, Josh Kroenke was around. I did not see Stan. He may or may not have been around, but I did not see him around. Michael Malone is around and his staff is around, which, they're always there to some capacity. But I think I got the sense, one of my big takeaways this summer league is that there's a lot of people right now involved. Michael Malone talked about this last year. Go all the way to June. You do the parade. You go right into summer league. He was a little disconnected from everything. I get the sense the whole org is like, we need to reconnect. We need to dive into this in a way that maybe we hadn't last year. Is it a pivotal year? Probably in a lot of ways, it's a pivotal year just in terms of everybody's being evaluated. But I think there is also there's the sense of like, all right, we need to focus on all the little details here and going forward, because last year maybe we weren't able to do that to our full capacity.
That's going to do it for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Swipe will be with you tomorrow on Thursday. We'll do Swipe and Gripe on Friday morning for my last show before I go on vacation for a week. We'll talk to you guys again then. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On Nuggets.
Oh man, there it is.